Now, I know there are a lot of different ways to build products, but we thought you might be interested in seeing how a truly great team approaches it. And to do that, next up, we've invited some special guests who are going to share their unique take on building products. They are Katie Dill, Head of Design, and David Singleton, CTO, from Stripe. Stripe is an amazing company that cares deeply about craft in both engineering and design, and has always had an extreme focus on the end user. So I'm pretty excited to hear what they have to say on their approach to building products. And our very own VP of Engineering, MARCEL will be moderating this conversation. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Katie, David, and MARCEL.
Katie, David, thank you so much for joining us today at Config, and thank all of you for joining us as well. As YUHKI was just mentioning, Stripe is a company that's really known for both its design and its technical excellence and sort of the strong foundations. I'd like to know how those two organizations fit together and how that actually coexists in terms of your org structure.
Good question. Well, I'll start by saying I think we're pretty lucky that from the get-go, the founders really understood the importance of user experience. And so design and engineering from the beginning have been pretty closely intertwined. And then, of course, as we've grown beyond an API, but to a full set of products, there's like 14 different products 13 years later, it becomes a more complex system. And so really understanding the complications of the user experience and making it feel really powerful, but yet super intuitive at the same time, of course, we have to work hand in hand. And so regardless of reporting structures, we think about our mission teams and the teams that are building a product in pursuit of a goal for the users. And in those cases, we're like side by side. In some cases, Zoom side by side, but really working hand in hand in the products that I think makes the big difference in thinking it through both the technology and the usability of it for the human at the end of the day.
And building on that, building product at Stripe, it really is a team sport across the functions. So we built economic infrastructure for the internet, and a lot of the kind of core creative thought that we have to put into that comes from not only designers and engineers and product managers, but also teams like product legal. So we really look at those teams of integrated subject matter experts in what we're trying to do for our users and subject matter experts in their craft as how we create what we're doing. So it's a really fun setup.
That's great, thank you. David, you mentioned that it's a team sport, and one of the things we just showed is sort of the dev mode and really trying to get to this disabusing folks the notion of a single moment of handoff from design to development. I'd love it if you could talk a little bit about how that interplay happens throughout the design and development process, like how this team sport sort of comes together and when you all work together in that way.
Yeah, I'm really excited about dev mode because I think it's going to work great for Stripe because, I mean, literally there is no handoff at Stripe. We are continually iterating between design, engineering, product, right in the kind of micro details. And actually to kind of get a sense of this, I think it might make sense for me to talk about how do we even think about building product at Stripe in the first place. So the most important thing for me is that we encourage and work hard so that everyone across product development is talking to users a lot. So that's designers, engineers, product managers, et cetera. And it really is when we talk to users and we see themes across their needs that's our invitation to go and build the next layer of our economic infrastructure, to build the next features in a particular product or new products altogether. And then when we've figured that out, we try to identify who are the very small number of users that we're going to get super close to, the kind of prototypical users for this particular thing that we're trying to get done. As an example of that, Stripe Billing, which is our product for subscriptions and invoicing, some of the early users were companies like Figma. So I'm excited to be here today and see how Figma has grown, and other companies like Slack. We got their users that were going to use this part of the product in shared Slack channels with us. We'd meet with them a lot. And you want to get into this feedback loop where within as short a period as possible, we call this the OODA loop of product development, you can hear about a bit of feedback or a need that the user has, iterate on it in the design and the code, and get it back in front of them to hear what they're saying. So it's really a very continuous process at Stripe, and therefore that tight loop is quite valuable.
Awesome. That tight loop that you mentioned, it's also, Stripe, as I said, is known for sort of its excellence and design. It's also working with people's money. So there's a strong foundation there. Things just need to work at the bedrock level. But at the same time, there's a lot of cool innovation that's happening. Like, we see some really amazing things come out. How do you balance the work of innovation and the important, but sort of important drudgery work as well?
Excellent question. I feel like, a drudgery, we're like, oh, what? Give us your problem. Because I think it's actually like thinking through those things. Sometimes the things that we just, people have just become used to. It's like, oh, well, this is just the way it works. And like, fine, I have to work around this thing. But I mean, as you all showed with Figma today, it's like, well, if you pay attention to your users, you realize they're facing a problem, and you can make their lives so much better and help them achieve their goals by digging into that problem and seeing it through. And I think in the creation cycle, yes, I think the big shiny idea of like, how can we really rethink this is an exciting part of the work and creating that vision. But I also know that the great things happen over time and iteration. And I was actually just yesterday, or just the other day, having a chat with some of our IC leaders talking about just the power of seeing it all the way through in that iteration cycle, and where like you really get to see your vision come to life. Because frankly, if you're thinking big enough, you probably can't get it done in that first ship. Like, it probably is in the over time build out of the new features and of what you learn from your user once it's in their hands to really perfect it to that next level. And so, honestly, we do find that to be the innovation and the exciting part of it.
Yeah, and we also, at Stripe, we have a set of operating principles, and one of our operating principles is to be meticulous in our craft. And when you think about what we're doing, it really, really matters, right? We are helping businesses, millions of them, bring money into their business that they need in order to run their operations, and we're helping them move money out to all of the folks that they partner with and their suppliers and so forth. So it's absolutely mission critical. It has to work really well. And therefore, we believe that we have to sweat the details across everything that we do. And the way that that translates at scale is there are many problems that we work on at Stripe where I think a lot of other companies in the world may say, oh, well, that particular problem is kind of boring, right? We'd rather focus on something else. But honestly, the boring problems are our passion. Like, we want to take all of the things that other companies might conceive of as drudgery and turn them into the places that we add a tremendous amount of value. And so when we sweat the details on that stuff that might feel kind of too boring or too hard to get into, we find it actually delivers just a tremendous amount of value for our users. And a good example of that is we spend hours and hours and hours looking at online checkout flows. And we've looked at thousands of them, and it would probably surprise you to know that in 2023, we've found like major retailers that will have details missing, like you go into the card number entry box and you get an alphanumeric, like an alphabet keyboard. Like, that shouldn't happen these days. We see this across so many experiences, and we channel all of that notice for the friction points into how we develop our own experiences. So we have a set of hosted flows, the Stripe checkout experience, the Stripe payment element experience, where we've taken all of that, attention to detail and craft, and put it into package solutions that you can drop in and customize the way that you want. And we actually see that kind of compounding focus on small details over a long time. It really pays off. So if you use, we've done a very large study, and we find that if you use those hosted surfaces where we've really been meticulous in the details, businesses typically see a 10.5% revenue uplift over a vanilla checkout flow. And there's not a lot of things you can do in a business that deliver 10% more revenue, right? So the point is, sweating those details, it really, really matters. And it's great to be able to show those examples within the company and to everyone else.
That's amazing. I know that the details are a point of leverage for you, and you can really get a lot out of it. Katie, you mentioned at the same time, like, thinking if your vision's big enough, you may not get there in one step. But at the same time, when Stripe releases something, it lasts forever. It's not going to be broken when the next version of that comes out. Can you talk a little bit about how that approach to realizing your full vision takes place over increments of years in some cases.
Yeah. I think there's kind of two things that work in tension here, which is one, we're building software. It's not like a chair. Like I can't change the design of the chair someone's sitting in. Like we can iterate and we can keep building and keep progressing what is out there as we learn and perfect it over time. Like we're marching towards perfection. We're never at perfection. But at the same time, I think it's important to really be clear on what are the goals and what are you trying to achieve and what does your user need, and knowing where that bar is, and being comfortable and being courageous enough to say, this thing isn't ready yet, let's not ship it. And that dynamic, that calibration can be hard in trying to understand where do we each sit on the point of view as to what is okay to ship and what isn't. But I will say, to your point, sometimes even just the cosmetic issues, the visual details of how something is closely aligned, actually matters a lot in terms of communicating trust, which is so very important because, yes, we do have the responsibility of people's finances and we're helping these businesses run. So, of course, they take it very seriously. And so we, too, have to take those details seriously with full acknowledgement that we want to get better over time on the areas where we can.
Yeah, and then building on that, we do work hard to get product into some users' hands as fast as possible. So we typically work with alpha users at a very early stage, way before we've GA'd a product. And there, we have to be kind of accepting of, yeah, there are going to be a few broken edges. We'll talk to them about what they're letting themselves in for first. And then we want to run that really tight feedback loop I talked about earlier. And then it's at the point where those alpha users are really, truly delighted that we start to feel ready to put the feature or the product into GA. There's also, I think, a practice at Stripe that I think is quite important here, which is we know, therefore, that we're going to be looking at a lot of product experiences that are not finished. And even once they're released, we know that we have to keep paying attention to places where they're not working perfectly, especially as we add more and more products. They have to work together really, really well. So we have a practice called friction logging. It's actually something that Katie and I really enjoy doing together. So we set aside one of our one-to-ones about once a month to actually do this together. We'll choose some area of the product. We'll put on a user hat. So we actually talk about what user, what kind of business are we representing today, and walk through the experience of using that particular flow or that particular feature from soup to nuts. So we'll start with creating a new account. We'll go through the flow of learning about it and then putting it into action. And as we do that, we make very detailed notes about the things that we ran into that seem suboptimal from that user's perspective. And by the way, this is a practice we do across the company. It's not just Katie and I doing it, although it is one of the most fun times that I ever have at work is when we go through product together. But it's a practice that we do at scale. And this has had really profound impact on our product. Sometimes we spot those little alignment bugs or whatever that Katie was just mentioning, but also very frequently we spot major interaction design issues where we realize, oh, we're introducing this concept later in the documentation, but they already needed to understand it in order to actually complete part of the flow. Or we'll find places where the products don't work together the way we'd like them to. And so that friction logging ritual really is extremely important in how engineers, designers, everyone up and down the company actually identifies what's needing to be changed in the product, and we use that to prioritize the work that we do.
There's two things I want to call out about what you're talking about there. So one, I think the fact that we have multiple disciplines trying this, right? So product marketing, PMs, legal, it is very useful for them to take a look at the product at different stages and think about what it's like from a user, because frankly, we're all building the product, right? It's not just engineering, design, product management, we're all contributing in some way. And that visibility into the product experience, like a user experiences it in a journey across the multiple touch points from advertisement to the website into the product, really is eye-opening to see where those seams exist. But the other thing is that I would say, and this wasn't always the case, but we do a lot of reviews before something launches, and I'm sure in many of your companies you do too, lots of design crits, et cetera, to try to understand it before it launches. And usually right before it launches, it's probably at its best state. But what happens in the real world over time is well, everybody's shipping things from different parts of your company, and slowly but surely it's like a house where everybody built their own room, but nobody was really organized on the plan in the end. And that can become a quick disaster. And so even though everybody's shipping their best, the intersections can really start to fall apart. And so we look at live product, not just like the stuff that's coming, but the stuff that's out there that can actually deteriorate over time to find those problems.
I love that. So in some ways, you're finding the seams between the different products, and then you're really building up the empathy across the organization for what the customer experience is like.
Yeah, that term, the seams between the products, we talk about it so much at Stripe. And we want everyone doing this to highlight that the seams are often where the experience can fall down. And many times, those friction logs produce new interactions between teams where folks will realize, oh, I'm going to partner with this other group in order to kind of smooth that rough edge.
Yeah. I love that friction log concept. That's great. I know that Stripe had their own conference not too long ago, Sessions, and you launched a ton of things. Can you tell us a little bit about the process that leads up to launching those type of products all at once? I mean, you mentioned sort of the alpha folks way, way before, but all the way up to that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, David's point about like iterating with our users is a really important part of our product development cycle, because of course, I think it's important that the team develops an intuition, and so you do a lot of research, you try to understand like what our users might need. It's of course the Henry Ford thing, like of course like they're gonna say faster horse, but like the reality is our users are extremely intelligent. They know their business, they know what they're trying to achieve, and so while we don't ask them like what kind of horse do you want, we do ask like, well, what are you trying to achieve, and try to like better understand what they're facing and what context they're existing within, so that we could build products towards that. And then the kind of iteration cycle through the product development process, like you already talked about billing, and we have a constant iterations cycle where we even get in Slack channels with our users, and we're talking about how they feel about the different products that we're launching, and so that we can work on it together. So by the time that we're launching it to the world, we're going live with it, essentially, we've already done a lot of that iteration.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a relatively unconventional process in large consumer companies to kind of work in the open with the garage doors up, but that's definitely how we do things at Stripe. And it sounds like that's kind of what you did as you were developing dev mode at Figma, right? It was in the hands of a bunch of beta users. There's no product that we launch at a conference at Stripe or any moment at Stripe that hasn't already been in many users' hands for some time. And of course, it's a gradual rollout. We start with those prototypical users that are particularly important to the direction that we want to take the product. And I mean, it really is the case that our kind of business strategy, our product strategy, is to be led by our users. So if I think about some of the most important products at Stripe, products like Connect, which is our product for platforms and marketplaces, the ideas behind that came from working with companies like Lyft in the early days and Shopify, obviously in quite different industries, but we realized these companies both are building multi-sided marketplaces. So we took the ideas behind the problems they were running into and turned it into this product Connect, which is literally an API for creating Stripe accounts. And when you have something like that, we can take care of a lot of the plumbing and the heavy lifting of money movement licenses and all the reporting that you need to do in order to let those companies focus on their unique mission. So the point is, the problem comes from our users. We pick the prototypical ones, we build it out, and then we get it in the hands of many more users. So at the point that you see it at Sessions, it's been in the hands of a lot of users for months, and in some cases years, for some of the very difficult things to get right. But of course, at a conference, you want to kind of bring it together to make sure that it's clear what's the value you can get out of all of these products. So one of the things that I was really excited for us to talk a lot about at Sessions this year was how that Connect product works with our other products, like Terminal for in-person payments, billing for subscriptions, and so forth, and actually enables companies that operate kind of in our ecosystem, these platforms, to provide just a tremendous amount of value to the businesses that build on them. And that's our typical way of working. It is really to iterate closely with users based on the problems that they're seeing.
Got it. So both of you have had illustrious careers even before you got to Stripe. I know, Katie, you were at Frog, and also at Airbnb and Lyft. And David, you were at Google for a while. Are there any practices that you picked up over the years that you still use today that you may have brought from prior companies?
Yeah, I have experienced a lot of growth in these companies that I've been at, and of course, what you see at a small team when there's 10 people and you're sitting side by side and you know what each other is working on and you can work things through together. It's different when the team is 25, 50, 100, et cetera. And so one thing that I had the experience of working on is figuring out how might we kind of mitigate those seams and make sure that we know what each other is up to and learn from in a way that scales. So at Airbnb many moons ago, I started doing this thing where we would share what is happening across the design team by putting a screenshot. This might seem archaic to Figma right now, but put a screenshot of what work we were doing across the team and then share that deck that had screenshots of people's work across. And we'd share it across our team, and then we'd share it with product managers and engineer leaders, et cetera. And that was giving everybody visibility into the work that was happening so that people could see, like, oh, you're trying to solve that problem too? Like, let's work on it together. Or, oh, this other team figured this out. Or, ooh, that's going to be a conflict with what we're building. And so we've done that. I did that when the team was 10, and then 50, and 100. And I've taken that to Lyft, and I've taken that to Stripe, and we still do it today.
Absolutely. It's my favorite deck that I see every 2 weeks. Go through every single slide.
Literally this morning, an Eng manager told me that it's their favorite doc that we send out around the company, because what it does is it puts a picture to the words, right? Like a lot of product managers, I love you so much, product managers, but a lot of times they're talking in goals and fancy keywords for what the project's name is, and that doesn't really enliven much understanding as to like, well, what is this going to be? What does this feel like for the user? And so when we put it into pictures and prototypes and people can see it, it's like, aha, like I get where that's going to be, and I get how that's going to be useful, or I get where that might cause some conflict. And so we send that out, and it's been really helpful since. And you do need to iterate on ways to scale it, and hopefully y'all can help us with the magical tools that you build. But that's been a key.
Great. I'd be remiss if I didn't get a chance to ask both of you about the future and what's coming. And I guess I'll keep this question fairly open-ended. What is it you're most excited about that's coming in the next few years? And I mean, it's 2023, so I need to ask you about AI as well and weave that in. But sort of, what is it either from tech stack or capabilities that you're really most excited about in the near term?
Yeah, well, at Stripe, we are definitely very excited about, and not just excited, but also seeing the value of AI, generative AI, large language models. We have had machine learning at the heart of how our products work since the very early days. So if you think about Radar, which is our product that is with the purpose of combating payments fraud, that is a large-scale machine learning system. And we actually have ML components in pretty much everything that we do these days. We actually brought some of the modern techniques, transformer models that are behind the kind of latest LLMs into our Radar product a couple of years ago. But I think, obviously, when people talk about AI today, they're mostly talking about these large language models and generative AI. And we've been very fortunate to have been part of the beta that OpenAI did when GPT-4 was coming out. We've actually been applying these techniques earlier than that as well. And we're quite excited for what that can do for us. So at Sessions, we showed a couple of experiences that we've built. If you use the Stripe docs, we think about our docs as part of the product. If you use the docs today, you can ask natural language questions, and there's an assistant that will route you to the best place to get the answer. We're building generative AI into Sigma. That's our tool for doing data analytics. You have to write SQL queries to use Sigma. So not everyone can do that, but if you have a conversational AI, it can generate those queries for you, and that allows many more people across businesses to get insight. But the main thing that I kind of want you all to know is the approach that we've taken to figuring this out has actually been to allow the ideas of how we might apply AI on our products to kind of emerge quite bottoms up across the company. So one of the first things that we did was we made an internal interface a little bit like ChatGPT available to everyone at Stripe. And it's an interface where it's actually safe to put in business relevant data. We are in control of the data. And it means that folks across lots of different functions, sales, marketing, design, engineering, are all able to use that open-ended UI and see how they can bring value into their own work. And then we allow people across the company to save presets, and we see that they're getting used a lot. That's our invitation to go in and turn them into internal tools and maybe ideas for external tools. So we find it really meaningful and valuable to enable bottoms-up innovation with this latest technology. And I'm really excited about where that's going to take us.
That's great.
I would just build on that with in regards to kind of creative functions. Like, of course, I'm excited about all the things that you all are going to fix and all the things that AI is going to fix in the creative process. But I really do feel like what we're seeing is just there are a couple of ways that I hope that we can become even stronger creatively, because I do think that what we can build as like creative innovators is magical, but AI can fuel that thinking, AI can scale that thinking, and the other part is it can even, lack of a better word, reconcile it, because one of the things that happens, it's certainly at companies as they scale, is that it's like information overload. Like, we have so many different design files and so many different docs with great ideas out there, but where are the differences? It's almost like what you guys showed, like the overlap of the differences. Like, that is magical, to be able to see where these intersections are, and so that we can really build on the new creative thinking. And certainly with the connection between developers and designers is so powerful. I think in the past it's been like a little like you need a Rosetta Stone to like kind of communicate across, and it's like we all want the best thing at the end. We all want meticulous, well-crafted, beautiful and effective products, and the way we can do that certainly is to reduce those seams, which I think you all are working towards, because when we see that happening, we're improving each other's work. We're building off the ideas. Yeah. Developers are putting out ideas of like, how can we actually make this more innovative, and designers on top of that, and we're iterating in that cycle in such a powerful way. So I'm excited about what you've shown, and I'm excited about how that continues to go further, so that the production code versus the design become one and the same.
Yeah, one of the most exciting things about working at Figma and just being a part of the Figma community is this notion that everyone is a maker and that everyone gets to participate in that development process. So I really appreciate your words of wisdom about how you're able to accomplish that at Stripe. So thank you both for joining us today. And thank you all for coming.
Thanks. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.